let's head straight to Burma. We're hitting jet in 3-hour stops.
There's gonna chill out once we get it in Chen.
On March 11th, 1943, a formation of 4 transport planes from the China National Aviation Corporation flew over the Gaoligong Mountains in western China, en route to Dinjan, India. One of the planes, aircraft number 53, was captured on film by another plane in the formation. "15 minutes later, as they flew over a snow-capped mountain pass, the aircraft ran into severe turbulence.
We're in a nosedive. The plane's totally out of control.
December 2023, inside a hangar in northwest China, an MA-60 aircraft, manufactured by the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, is being readied. This outstanding example of a domestically produced aircraft is scheduled to fly to Tengchong, Yunnan. There it will undertake a special mission, retracing the historic air route known as the Hump.
I was a Hump pilot. I was carrying everything that the Flying Tigers needed to stay in business. I carried their bombs, their gasoline, their bullets, even things like trucks, transportation, and clothing even, you know, things wear out. And we took, shoes, shirts, just a variety of things.
Robert Moore, a 100-year-old resident of San Francisco, was a transport plane pilot for the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1944. When he was 20, he flew cargo between China and India.
The only transportation we had was flying. That was after the Burma Road was captured by the Japanese. Originally, they could use the Burma Road, but once the Japanese had occupied Burma, then the Flying Tigers needed a flight in, was the only way we could get supplies to them.
The route Robert Moore flew over 80 years ago stands at the center of one of the most perilous and heroic chapters in the history of aviation. In May 1942, after Japan's occupation of Myanmar, then known as Burma, and parts of western Yunnan, the Burma Road, the last remaining supply route connecting China to the outside world, was cut off. This resulted in a severe shortage of supplies, placing China at a disadvantage in its war against Japanese aggression. To address this, China and the United States decided to establish an air route from Assam, India, to Kunming, China. Only this way could they transport supplies for China's war effort. The route is approximately 800 kilometers long and requires flying over the tropical river valleys of India, the northern jungles of Myanmar, the southern segment of the Himalayas, and the Hengduan Mountains in western China. The continuous peaks and undulating flight path resemble the humps of a camel, which is why the route is known as the Hump.
盟军当时在全球的航线很多，驼峰航线相对来讲还是比较短的一条航线，但是它的政治意义是非常重大，因为它是把盟国和中国联系在了一起，既可以借助这条航线给中国进行物质上的援助，同时又极大的鼓舞了中国人民的士气，可以说它是一条建立在空中的滇缅宫。
The supplies flown into China via the Hump airlift were mainly war materials like ammunition and gasoline. In exchange, items such as pig bristles, tung oil, parachute silk, and mineral resources like tin, tungsten, and mercury were shipped out of China to support the Allies. In July 1945, when the Hump was at its busiest, a fully loaded transport plane landed at Kunming's Wujiaba airport, every 5 minutes. But making use of vital transportation route was fraught with danger. Getting over the hump was anything but a walk in the park. Myitkyina Airport in northern Myanmar was a crucial base for the Allied forces in the China-Burma-India theater. After the Japanese occupied northern Myanmar in May 1942, they used the airfield to launch attacks on transport planes flying the hump.
驼峰航线在前一年的这个运输量其实并不是太多，更多的，在前期更多的是一种精神上的象征。日本人也明白这一点，他们认为驼峰航线是，中国人的一支强心针，所以要不遗余力的来打击驼峰航线，来摧垮中国人的抗战意志。
The threat posed by Japanese aircraft forced Allied pilots attempting to navigate the hump to fly northward. This added some 400 kilometers to the journey. As a result, crews had to negotiate the treacherous climate and terrain of the Himalayan region.
We moved the flight path more into the mountains, higher mountains. Japanese fighters couldn't fly in instruments. They had to see us to shoot. And so if they couldn't see our plane in the clouds and so forth, you know, we were free of them, but not free of all the dangers of the weather. And, you know, if I had a choice, I wouldn't have flown. I'd have stayed home. But the hump never closed. That was the rule. There is no weather on the hump. Well, there was, but it meant that since there was no weather, it was never an excuse not to fly.
He talked about horrible electrical storms. And in those days, they didn't have radar or any of the things that GPS or anything. They flew by instruments. But the lightning would affect the instruments. And so they had to fly by sight.
Strong winds were among the most feared weather conditions for the hump pilots, sometimes reaching speeds over 150 kilometers per hour, similar to a typhoon. The C-47 transport planes flying the hump had a speed of only 260 kilometers per hour, so when facing headwinds, it felt like they were being pushed back half a meter for every meter they advanced.
Cold air was coming down from the north, and warm air coming up out of the Bay of Bengal. They collided usually right over the hump where we were flying. And that collision of cold air and warm air created terrible storms. Planes were buffeted, like the winds would raise you up and drop you down, or there's always like a wind that tried to blow you into higher mountains, which you had to avoid because you couldn't get to that altitude.
Unpredictable weather, treacherous terrain, and attacks by Japanese aircraft. A nightmare combination that made the hump one of the most challenging, hazardous, and deadly air routes in the world at that time. On average, the hump claimed a toll of one plane crashed every 2 days. But sometimes the hump really did take its pound of flesh. On January 6, 1945, for example, a severe hailstorm struck the hump. The result? 15 aircraft downed. On February 27, 1945, hump pilot Loyal Mars Jr. died in a crash. His wife, Chick Quinn, described the site of her husband's death in her book, The Aluminum Trail. In the area extending over 80 kilometers on either side of the hump, across the Himalayas and the Hengduan Mountains, hundreds of aircraft wrecks are scattered along the cliffs and canyons. Pilots used the glint of metal from the wreckage and the smoke from crashed planes as navigational aids, referring to this stretch of the route as the Aluminum Trail. Hump pilots like Loyal Mars Jr. knew only too well that every mission could be their last. Yet they pressed on, their determination unwavering, following the path marked by the wreckage of their comrades' planes. So it was that their fallen comrades did their best to help the living to reach their objective. The Hump operations were crucial in supporting the main eastern battlefield of the global war against fascism, but they came at a great cost. It is estimated that for every litre of gasoline delivered to the Flying Tigers, 6 litres were used in transporting it there. Behind every drop of gasoline lay the immense courage and sacrifice of the Hump pilots. To honor the pilots who flew the Hump, on December 23, 2023, an MA-60 aircraft embarked on a special mission called Reflying Over the Hump, flying from Xi'an, Shanxi Province to Tengchong, Yunnan Province. At 2:17 p.m., the MA-60 landed at Tengchong Airport. The mission is set for 3 days from now. The crew and ground staff are conducting a thorough inspection of the aircraft. Everything must be in tip-top condition and ready to go. This aircraft will take off from Tengchong, retracing the flight path of the Hump pilots from over 80 years ago. Around the time the MA-60 landed, Chen Anqi and Pan Yongding also arrived in Yunnan. As children of Hump pilots, they will take part in the Reflying the Hump expedition in 3 days' time.
你看，这架飞机是这个原物，这个。
这门儿我有印象，
哎，
是那个潘爸爸有一张照片，老照片，有一张照片，
有一张照片，
那就是中航飞驼峰期间的。我父亲叫陈维龄，他是广东人，广东番禺人。到了45年初呢，那么正好是中航在驼峰空运要招人，就从1945年的2月份，那个到了5月份是在那个中航飞驼峰航线，它主要是飞 C46，也有飞 C47。
我的父亲名字叫潘国定，1940年参加中航，作为副驾驶员进入到了中航。爸爸也是第一批就参加了驼峰这个空运了，一直到1945年的8月份，这是他整个在驼峰飞行的过程。
At that time, the Hump airlift missions were jointly conducted by the US Army Air Forces and China National Aviation Corporation, CNAC. The planes marked with the Chinese character Zhong belonged to CNAC, where Chen Anqi and Pan Yongding's fathers served. CNAC was a civilian aviation company jointly owned by China and the United States. It had management and crew members from both countries. Many of its pilots were Chinese and Chinese American.